Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something you probably drive right past every single day without even realizing it. We're talking about the massive cross-jurisdictional surveillance network known as Flock Safety. We're going to dive into the data, the court filings, and the official audits laid out in our source report to understand exactly how this technology operates, the absolute massive scale at which it collects data, and the growing legal controversies surrounding it all. Let me start by challenging a common assumption. You know when you see one of those little solar-powered cameras in your neighborhood, or maybe outside a local school? You probably just think of it as a basic neighborhood watch tool, right? Like maybe it snaps a picture of a license plate if a crime happens nearby. Well, the report we're looking at today reveals a completely different reality. We're actually dealing with a highly complex, interconnected network that's designed for broad data collection first and selective searching later. To really get our heads around this, we've broken this explainer down into 5 key parts: beyond the plate, the mass surveillance dragnet, documented misuse, the legal patchwork, and finally, reining in the tech. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Beyond the plate. Unpacking the AI surveillance stack. Okay, so is it just a license plate reader? That's probably the biggest misconception the report tackles. It is so easy to think of these systems as just basic cameras waiting to match a passing license plate to a police hot list. But if we actually look at Flock's own marketing and technical documents highlighted in the source, we start to see a much bigger picture. The report details that Flock actually sells a really broad AI surveillance stack. For instance, they use a tool called Vehicle Fingerprint. This lets users search for vehicles using ordinary language prompts. So you're not just searching for a license plate, you're looking for a specific car color, body type, temporary plates, or even really distinct markers like a roof rack or a bumper sticker. And it doesn't even stop at vehicles. Flock's Condor video line adds features that are explicitly marketed for automatic people and vehicle detection, and even people tracking. Plus, the system encourages public-private integration. This means camera feeds from your local HOA, property managers, and corporate security teams can be piped directly into local law enforcement platforms. Basically, public and private surveillance are merging into the exact same investigative pipeline. Moving on to Section 2, the mass surveillance dragnet. And we're talking about the sheer scale of collection here. Over 20 billion. Let that number sink in for a second. According to the report, Flock markets a national LPR network that processes more than 20 billion license plate reads every single month across thousands of communities and police agencies in 49 states. This right here is what the report identifies as the fundamental dragnet architecture. And a dragnet means the system isn't just looking for suspects, it is continuously scooping up records on millions of ordinary, completely innocent drivers and storing those historical movements so they can be correlated, searched, and shared retrospectively. To put that into perspective and see what a dragnet actually looks like in practice, the report cites a lawsuit challenging the system over in San Jose. In 2024, police there collected over 361 million scans. But out of those hundreds of millions of scans, only about 923,000 were actual hits, meaning they matched a hot list. So what does that mean? It means 99.8% of the data collected was on drivers totally unconnected to any active alert. When millions of innocent records are retained just to find a single target, the privacy implications regarding our everyday movements become pretty massive. Which brings us to Section 3, documented misuse and failures. What happens when this unseen mass cracks? This timeline brilliantly illustrates how these issues have really escalated between late 2024 and early 2026. Derived directly from court filings and official releases, we see a rapid succession of inflection points. You've got major constitutional lawsuits filed in Norfolk and San Jose, controversies over out-of-state sharing raised by the California Attorney General, reports of unauthorized access by federal agencies in Mountain View, and multiple findings regarding sensitive investigations and security exposures. It's a lot, right? Now, let's walk through some of the specific documented harms because these have real-world consequences. First, in Toledo, Ohio, a false Flock alert misidentified a vehicle as stolen. That error led to an armed stop, a police dog attack, and a jail stay for the driver, eventually resulting in a $35,000 city settlement. Then, in Texas, the Electronic Frontier Foundation documented an abortion-related investigation that spanned a network of over 83,000 cameras. Meanwhile, in Illinois, official state audits found that local data was being shared with U.S. Customs and Border Protection in direct violation of state law, forcing the state to actually order access shut off.
And nationwide, audits revealed over 50 agencies running hundreds of searches related to protest activity, alongside discoveries of agencies using anti-Romani slurs in their search reasons. The report is careful to note that these aren't just isolated incidents, they're recurring issues driven by the system's really broad sharing settings.
So why do these false positive stops keep happening? Well, we've got to look at the human element. The report has this really critical insight, stating the danger is often a machine-human chain failure, misread or over-trusted machine output, stale or poorly verified hotlist data, and officers escalating before visual confirmation. See, even though Flock emits play translation can sometimes be inaccurate, the real danger happens when humans over-rely on the machine's output without taking the time to independently verify the facts on the ground. And then, on top of human error, you have technical vulnerabilities. The report notes that Flock's Connor video devices briefly exposed troubleshooting interfaces directly to the public internet, which allowed outsiders to just view live feeds. Furthermore, the National Vulnerability Database documented a critical 9.8 out of 10 security flaw that involved hard-coded passwords. But perhaps the biggest concern raised here is function creep. When you start combining plate records, video, audio, drones, and private camera feeds all into one searchable interface, the risk to civil liberties really starts to compound. The system basically shifts from asking, hey, who drove by here, to essentially trying to reconstruct an individual's entire life and associations. All right, Section 4, the legal patchwork, navigating these shifting legal waters. Here's the crazy thing. Right now, the US relies on this totally fractured legal patchwork. Your level of privacy largely depends on your zip code. Just look at this massive disparity. Virginia recently updated its laws requiring systems to purge data after a strict 21 days. But over in Illinois, state law allows law enforcement to retain this exact same data for up to 5 years. And Flock's own default system allows data retention for up to a year with local approval. Because there is absolutely no national standard, the rules of the game change entirely depending on local shifting policies. All this inconsistency fuels a massive, unresolved constitutional debate around the Fourth Amendment, specifically regarding a concept known as the whole of movements doctrine. Now, the traditional argument has always been that a license plate captured on a public road just isn't private. But the lawsuits currently unfolding in cities like Norfolk and San Jose are arguing something different. They argue that when you aggregate millions of data points, make them historically searchable, and share them widely, it's no longer just a single public observation. Instead, it reveals the entirety of a person's life, where they worship, what doctors they visit, who they associate with. The courts haven't squarely resolved yet if this kind of dense, networked surveillance requires a warrant. Finally, Section 5, reining in the tech. Let's look at mitigating these risks. So, what's the fix? The report lays out some very specific, concrete guardrails for communities and police to mitigate these risks. Step 1. Sharply reduce data retention. They argue for a 21-day cap, noting that anything longer makes retrospective mass tracking way too easy. Step 2. Default to local-only data sharing. It's the national lookups and ambiguous interagency sharing that led to those unauthorized federal access controversies we talked about earlier. Step 3. Implement strict human verification rules. A machine output must absolutely never be the sole basis for an arrest or an armed stop. Officers have to visually confirm the data. And Step 4. Enforce deep public transparency. Agencies need to publish their camera locations, usage stats, and undergo independent audits so the public knows exactly what's happening in their own neighborhoods. Ultimately, it all boils down to one really profound question the report leaves us with. Where do we draw the line between public safety and mass surveillance? As Flock Safety's architecture continues to lower the cost of tracking human movement on a national scale, communities have to decide if the current guardrails are strong enough. The technology is already here, guys. It's integrated into the intersections and neighborhoods we traverse every single day. The real question is how we choose to govern it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a clear understanding of the complex realities operating behind the cameras in our communities.